Let's go.
Strong signal. Station.
We're rolling. We're gonna go in 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Bringing you on the front line and beyond the headlines.
Beyond the headlines.
Outside the wire. Outside the wire.
Welcome to Outside the Wire. I'm Bob Parks. One morning while in Washington, D.C., I found myself doing something not in my normal everyday routine. I was watching CNN. Not because I had some kind of epiphany, but because it was the only cable news station offered in the room. It was what I saw that kind of set my mood for the day. Not believing what I saw, I later checked their website. 2007, now the deadliest year for U.S. troops in Iraq. Baghdad. 6 U.S. troops were killed in Iraq on Monday, making 2007 the deadliest for the American military in the Iraq War. The grim record came despite lower death rates in recent months, which were not enough to offset death tolls that topped 100 during 3 months in the spring. 4 soldiers were killed when a roadside bomb exploded near their vehicle in northern Iraq's Tamim province. Another died in combat in Anbar province. A sailor was killed in the Saladin province as a result of injuries sustained from an explosion while conducting operations, the military said. According to a CNN count of Pentagon figures, 855 U.S. service members have died so far in 2007. The next highest death toll was in 2004, when 849 were killed. The total number of U.S. military deaths in Iraq stands at 3,857, including 7 civilian contractors of the Defense Department. The high number of deaths this year corresponds with the U.S. troop buildup called the Surge, and a crackdown on insurgents in and near Baghdad. CNN's counting. Oh, and yes, blame it on the Surge, the left to this day calls a sham and is not working. What got me about this story was CNN's attempt to balance their coverage with a touchy-feely puff piece on soldiers returning home. Don't get me wrong, anytime a soldier comes home alive, it's a great story. But it would appear some at the major news networks are trying to play both sides of the fence yet again. They want to appear to be supporting the troops, yet their anti-war agenda keeps oozing through. I say this because I've always found the whole American service member body count thing repulsive. I find it repulsive because we hear about our casualties, that of the Iraqi citizens in the middle, but we never hear of the number of enemy dead. Why is that? Could it be that giving that number in contrast to our casualties may give an entirely different impression of how the war is really going? I have a woman back in Boston who can't watch the local news at 10 whenever war segments come on. She has a son in Iraq. We seldom see stories of successes in Iraq on local broadcasts, despite the growing realization by those with eyes wide open that things are much better there. And when it comes to local news, war news means a local casualty. But think about it. Listening to the major networks and print publication war coverage is like listening to a football game on the radio and only hearing what the other side is doing. We hear when they score, but when we have the ball, the radio goes silent. With that, the impression would always be that we're behind or losing. When it comes to those against the war, that would be the desired impression to give the American people. As I said earlier, this has been bugging me for months now. In fact, last March I did a radio spot on this very subject. That radio spot offended the hell out of the usual activists. How dare I want to know how many of the enemy we've killed? How heartless, how cruel. I'm such a warmonger. But it's okay, on the other hand, to proudly display the number of Americans and Iraqis killed, primarily by the enemy, on the sides of homes, buildings, and on websites. That is what they consider truth. I continue to be repulsed by our media and their playing games with the American people over the war. This is not a game. Our young people volunteered to serve, and despite the flawed reasoning given by Cindy Sheehan types, almost all who signed on the line knew where they'd be going and signed anyway. That takes more guts than most in the media will ever have. That's what makes their playing number games with our dead more than disgusting. There ought to be a law. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be living in the early 1940s. I understand it was a simpler time. There was no internet or no 24-hour news cycles. Words took a little more time to get around, but it seemed to be a more honest time, a more respectful time. America, as you know, was embroiled in a real war with the Germans and the Japanese, a world war on two fronts against two very determined and ruthless adversaries. But it also seemed like America was united from the top down in those days. Can you imagine if the then Speaker of the House, Sam Rayburn, came before our nation and the world and declared the war is unwinnable? Can any of you imagine what would happen if the then Senate Majority Leader, Alben Barkley, Democrat of Kentucky, told the nation and the world the war is lost? None of us can imagine that because it never would have happened. In those days, everyone made sacrifices to help the war effort. The nation was individually invested in seeing to it that the thousands of American and Allied soldiers who gave their lives to fight communism and the prospects of its world domination did not do so in vain. I can find no reports of anti-war protesters slamming the war effort on our streets, in our schools, and directly to our kids. But today's America is very different. We have a House Speaker and Senate Majority Leader who almost proudly declare defeat while our sons and now our daughters are on the ground in harm's way. Despite the valiant efforts of a general who, with his soldiers, have achieved the peace on the ground that we were all told was unattainable, many in our country are seemingly invested in the defeat of our soldiers. Why, you may ask? The answer is simple. We have a political party, the Democratic Party, that needs an American loss in battle for a political victory. They have from day one stated that the men and women of the United States military were and are incapable of winning a war that has freed millions of people in Iraq while luring the enemy into one theater of battle where we could and have isolated and destroyed them. For the last few weeks, the news from Iraq has been very positive. Just today, even the New York Times is reporting people moving with freedom around much of Baghdad, commerce returning, even liquor stores reopening. Do our politicians applaud our soldiers? No. I wonder what it would be like to live in the days when we actually lived in the United States of America. Pardon me? Okay. Civilian contractors of the defense. Because it was the only cable news station. Okay, thank you. Changing? Whenever war segment, well, one more time. Why, you may ask? During 3 months in this, okay, one more time, I'll do this. But it would appear some at the major net troops were killed on. Comes to the local news, war. Probably hasn't been tightened since. Good, nice touch. Stands at 300. It's only a 3-page script as opposed to like an 18. That's a wrap.